6 months after our divorce, my ex-husband, James, called out of the blue. "I'm getting married on the 8th of next month," he said. "The invitation is in the mail." My response was simple: "I can't make it. I just had a baby." 30 minutes later, he burst into my hospital room. The sharp, sterile scent of antiseptic filled my nostrils, pulling me from a hazy stupor. A throbbing pain from the C-section incision, low on my abdomen, pulsed in waves, a brutal reminder of the life-or-death surgery I had endured just last night. I shifted carefully, trying not to make a sound that would wake the tiny life resting in the bassinet beside my bed. My son, my little Leo, the name I had chosen for him, was fast asleep. He was born 2 weeks premature, his skin still red and wrinkled, looking impossibly small, swaddled in the crisp white hospital blanket. Outside the window, the New York City skyline was a canvas of gray, a cold winter drizzle blurring the distant skyscrapers. The incessant honking and bustle of the city streets seemed muted by the thick glass, leaving only a profound, lonely silence in the recovery room. I lay there, watching my son, a wave of overwhelming love mixed with a deep, aching loneliness washing over me. No husband, no family by my side, only my best friend, Jessica, who had just run home to grab more supplies. The phone on the bedside table buzzed, shattering the quiet. I glanced at the screen. The 2 words, James Carter, appeared, cold and sharp, as if they could cut right through me. It had been 6 months. 6 months since we walked out of the courthouse, our lives splitting into separate paths. I hesitated, tempted to ignore it, but my thumb unconsciously swiped the green icon. A force of habit, perhaps. "Hello?" I said, my voice hoarse from dehydration and exhaustion. The familiar, deep baritone echoed from the other end. That confident voice, the one that had captivated me in college, now carried a polite, almost chilling distance. "Claire? How are you?" James asked, but I knew it was just a perfunctory opening for his real purpose. He never called his ex-wife just to check in, especially not when he was busy running a billion-dollar real estate empire. "I'm still breathing," I replied curtly, my eyes fixed on my son's gently rising and falling chest. "What do you need?" A soft chuckle on the other end, the self-assured laugh of a man who always held the winning hand, still as sharp-tongued as ever. "I see. I'm calling to tell you something. I figured, since we were once married, you shouldn't have to hear it from someone else." I tightened my grip on the blanket, a sense of dread creeping in. "Ashley and I are getting married on the 8th of next month. At the plaza, I'd like to invite you to be there. After all, we should be able to be friends, right?" Every word James spoke was crystal clear. Of course, he was getting married. Ashley was a perfect match for him, an heiress from a prominent family, a woman who could help him in his career. Wasn't part of the reason for our divorce that I wasn't on his level? But why did a sharp pain, more real than my surgical wound, still pierce my heart? He was inviting me, his ex-wife, to watch him marry his new love just 6 months after we split. James's cruelty was always perfectly packaged in a veneer of civility and sophistication. What was he trying to prove? That he was magnanimous, or that I was nothing more than ancient history? "Claire, are you still there?" James's voice prompted, breaking my long silence. I looked at my son. He stirred, his tiny mouth making little sucking motions. A strange new strength surged within me. I was no longer the dutiful wife who waited up with a hot dinner for him every night. I was a mother now, and this mother would not allow anyone, not even the father of her child, to hurt her again. My voice, when I finally spoke, was steady and cold, all trembling gone. "Thank you for the invitation, but I'm afraid I won't be able to make it." "You're busy? If it's work at the gallery, you can put it off for one evening. I'll send a car." "It's not the gallery," I interrupted. Each word felt light, yet carried the weight of 1,000 pounds. "I'm in postpartum recovery." The other end of the line went dead silent. The world seemed to stop. I could hear the faint clinking of a glass, then nothing. A muffled whisper from someone beside him, and then the sound of his own breath catching. "What did you say?" James's voice was strained, all the previous smoothness gone. I said, "I'm in recovery. I had a C-section last night. It's a boy. I'm sure you won't mind if I'm absent on your big day, will you?" I didn't wait for his answer. I didn't want to hear any excuses or questions. My finger decisively pressed the end call button. The screen went black. I dropped the phone onto the mattress, feeling as if a massive weight had been lifted from my chest. Leo began to fuss. I leaned over, gritting my teeth against the pain from my incision, and gently patted his back. "Shh, it's okay, little one. Mommy's here. We don't need anyone else. We don't need anyone." Tears streamed down my face, hot and silent. I had won that conversation, but why did I feel so empty? I knew my words were not just a refusal, they were a lit fuse. Knowing James, he would never let this go. This fragile peace was about to end. 30 minutes. That's how long it took from the moment I hung up until the door to my room was thrown open with violent force. I was fumbling to prepare a bottle for Leo and jumped at the sound. The heavy wooden door slammed against the wall, startling my sleeping baby, who immediately began to wail. I rushed to comfort him, turning to scold whoever had barged in, ready to lecture them about noise in a hospital. But the words died in my throat when I saw it was James. But this wasn't the James Carter I knew. The impeccably dressed CEO with his slicked-back hair, tailored suits, and the scent of expensive cologne. The man standing before me was a wreck. He was wearing an ivory-colored tuxedo, probably from a fitting for the wedding, but the jacket was rumpled, the shirt untucked. The boutonniere on his lapel was wilted and crushed. His hair was a mess, matted with sweat, and his face was flushed. He was breathing heavily, his chest heaving as if he had just run a marathon. Sweat beaded on his forehead, rolling down his temples. James stood frozen in the doorway, his eyes wide, staring first at me, then at the screaming, red-faced infant in my arms. His gaze was a chaotic mix of shock, disbelief, and a flicker of raw fear I had never seen in him before. "Claire," he choked out, his voice a hoarse whisper. I fought to control my racing heart, forcing my expression to remain cold. I patted my son, my eyes focused on the blanket wrapped around him, not on James. "What are you doing here?" "This is a recovery ward. No visitors without permission." He ignored my dismissal. He strode into the room, his long legs closing the distance between us in an instant. The smell of sweat, cologne, and pure panic filled the air. "Is it true?" he demanded, his voice trembling as he pointed a shaky finger at the baby. "Whose child is this?" I lifted my head and looked directly into his dark eyes, the same eyes that had once made me swoon. Now they reflected a pale, weary woman in an oversized hospital gown. "He's my son," I stated clearly. "Who's the father?" James roared, the sound suppressed in his throat but still powerful enough to shatter my composure. He moved closer, his large hands gripping the bed rail so tightly his knuckles turned white. A bitter, twisted smile formed on my lips. "That's a funny question, James. We've been divorced for 6 months. I have my own life, you have yours. What does it matter to you who my child's father is?" "Don't play games with me." He lost control, leaning down until his face was inches from mine. 6 months. You gave birth 6 months after the divorce. Subtract 9 months of pregnancy. You were pregnant before we even went to court, weren't you? The sharp mind of a businessman had done the math in seconds. I knew I couldn't hide it anymore. I didn't want to. "Yes," I admitted, my gaze defiant. "So what? Why?" he hissed, his eyes shot with red veins. "Why didn't you tell me? How could you hide something like this from me?" "Tell you for what?" I shot back, my voice laced with bitterness. "So you could pity me? Or so you could bestow some leftover sense of responsibility on me while you were busy preparing to marry your heiress? Think back to that day, James. The day we signed the papers. What did you say? You said you needed a wife who could advance your career, not some dreamy artist who just paints all day. You needed freedom. You needed to climb the ladder. I gave you your freedom. What more could you possibly want?" James froze, stunned into silence. The old words, the knives he had once plunged into my heart, I was now returning to him, every single one. He let go of the bed rail and stumbled back a step, as if he'd been slapped. In my arms, Leo continued to cry, his infant wails cutting through the suffocating tension. James seemed to snap back to reality. He stared at the baby, his expression softening. "Let me see him," he whispered, his voice suddenly weak. "No." I clutched my son tighter, my maternal instincts flaring. "Go home," Your fiancé is waiting." "Let me see my son!" James suddenly shouted, lunging forward as if to grab him. "Don't you touch him!" I screamed, curling my body around the baby to protect him. Just then, the door opened again. A stern-faced nurse stepped in. "Please keep your voices down. This is a hospital, not a marketplace. Sir, who are you?" "Visiting hours haven't started. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." James froze, his hand still outstretched. He looked at me, at the baby, then back at the nurse with a fiery glare that made even her flinch, but he didn't cause another scene. He slowly lowered his arm, straightened his rumpled jacket, and took a deep, shuddering breath, trying to regain his composure, though his hands still shook. "I'm his father," he said to the nurse, his voice cold but firm. Then he turned back to me, his eyes dark like a stormy sky. "Did you really think you could hide him from me forever, Claire? You're wrong. Your biggest mistake was thinking you could take away my right to be a father." With that, he turned and walked out, leaving behind a chilling silence and a storm of anxiety brewing in my heart. I knew the real battle had just begun. After James left, I sat numbly on the bed, trembling. Leo had finally quieted, his tiny hand gripping my pinky finger as if seeking protection. I looked at him, tears welling up again. I had braced myself for this day, but I never imagined it would come so soon, or so violently. James's appearance was like a boulder thrown into the calm lake of the life I was trying to build. I was terrified, the fear of a vulnerable mother against the power and wealth of her ex-husband. James was right. I had underestimated his possessiveness. The door opened again. This time it was Jessica, my best friend, her arms laden with bags. She stopped short when she saw my red-rimmed eyes. "What's wrong? Is the incision hurting? Is the baby okay?" She dropped everything on the sofa and rushed over to feel my forehead. "James was here," I whispered. Jessica's eyes went wide. "What? He knows already? How? You just said he called about his wedding." "It was my fault. I told him I was in recovery." Jessica slapped her forehead. "Oh my God, Claire! You just poked the hornet's nest. What did he do?" I quickly recounted the brief, explosive encounter. As she listened, Jessica's face grew pale. She began pacing the room, her anxiety palpable. Knowing James, he won't let this go. He's ambitious and secretly a total patriarch. Now that he knows he has a son to carry on his name, he'll do whatever it takes to get him. "What's your plan?" "I don't know." I shook my head, feeling helpless. "I can raise him on my own. I have savings. The gallery is doing well. I don't need his money." "It's not about the money," Jessica snapped. "It's about his ego and that whole powerful family of his. Do you really think his mother will let her first grandson, the heir, be raised outside the fold?" Jessica's words were like needles pricking my conscience. My former mother-in-law, Margaret, was a formidable woman who valued lineage above all else. She had never liked me, an artist from a modest background. Now, knowing I had given birth to the family heir, she would see him as property of the Carter dynasty, not as my son. Suddenly, the door burst open again. It wasn't one person, but a group. James led the way, his jacket gone, his white shirt unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled up to his elbows. Behind him were a distinguished-looking doctor in a white coat and two nurses pushing a cart of medical equipment. "What is this?" I cried, clutching Leo protectively. James didn't look at me. He turned to the older doctor. "Professor, I'd like you to perform a comprehensive checkup. He was born 2 weeks premature. I'm worried about his lungs. And while you're at it, take a sample for a DNA test." "James, you wouldn't dare!" I screamed, trying to get up, but the pain from my incision pinned me to the bed. James strode over and pressed me back down by my shoulder. His hand was firm, but he was careful not to hurt me. "Stay still," he said, his voice low, the earlier anger replaced by an undeniable command. "I'm doing what's best for our son. You have no right to stop me. He's my son. He doesn't need a test. He's yours, too." "Look at him, Claire," James growled softly, his eyes boring into mine. "Look at that forehead, that curl of his lip. How long are you going to deny the truth?" I looked down at Leo. He was sleeping, but his tiny face was indeed a miniature version of James. The way he furrowed his brow, even in sleep, was exactly like his father. Blood was thicker than words. "The professor is the head of pediatrics here," James explained, his eyes never leaving the baby. "This hospital is good, but not the best. I need to be sure he's okay." Jessica tried to intervene but was blocked by a large bodyguard James had posted at the door. She could only watch me with a worried expression. The medical team began their examination of Leo, their movements professional and gentle. I watched helplessly as they drew a blood sample from his tiny heel for the test. His sharp cry pierced my heart. James stood nearby, his face turned away, his hands clenched into tight fists, veins popping on his arms. He was hurting too. I could see it. When the doctors had finished and left, James remained. He pulled a chair up next to the bassinet and sat, silently watching the baby, who was slowly drifting back to sleep. The tension in the room eased, replaced by a quiet, lingering sadness. "Why?" James asked without looking at me, his gaze still fixed on his son. It was the same question, but this time it wasn't filled with anger, only heavy reproach. "For the past 6 months, I've been living like a machine. And you were carrying my child, enduring morning sickness, your body changing, and then going through labor all by yourself. What do you think I am, Claire?" Even a stranger would have shown more compassion. "You chose your career," I replied warily. "You chose long business trips, client dinners, and you chose Ashley, the woman who could bring you lucrative contracts. I just chose to protect my son from your calculations." James turned to look at me, his expression a complex mix of guilt and the stubborn pride of a man who could never admit he was wrong. "I never said I didn't want a child. If I had known you were pregnant, I would have never agreed to the divorce. And that's exactly why I didn't tell you," I said with a sad smile. "I didn't want a marriage held together by obligation. I wanted to be loved, James, but you stopped loving me a long time ago." He was silent. He didn't deny it. Perhaps he finally recognized the stark truth. Our marriage had been dying long before the divorce papers were signed. This child had arrived too late to save our love, but just in time to become a new set of chains. His phone rang again. He glanced at the screen, scowled, and silenced it. It immediately rang again. "It's Ashley," I said bitterly, turning my face to the wall. "Your fiancé is calling. You should go. Don't keep her waiting." James looked at the phone, then at me and our son. He stood up but didn't answer. He turned the phone off completely and tossed it onto the sofa. "The wedding's off," he stated flatly. I snapped my head back around. "What did you say?" I said. "The wedding with Ashley is canceled. The moment I walked out of the hotel to come here, I told my assistant to call everything off." I stared at him, unable to believe it. He was canceling his wedding to the daughter of a major business partner, all because of a newborn child. "You're insane," I breathed. "Maybe," he smirked, a sad, humorless smile. He hesitantly reached out and gently touched Leo's tiny fingers peeking out from the blanket. "But I can't marry someone else when my son is lying here." That clumsy, trembling touch from one of the most powerful men in New York real estate made my heart flutter for a second. But my rational mind immediately slapped it down. "Don't fall for it. This isn't love. It's possession." James didn't leave. He sent his bodyguards away and parked himself on the small, uncomfortable sofa in my room. Seeing the situation, Jessica excused herself to go home and make me some soup, giving me a meaningful look that said, "Be careful." The room fell silent again, but it was a suffocating silence. I lay in bed, trying to sleep, but the image of the man slumped on the sofa, head in his hands, haunted me. The scent of his cologne had faded, replaced by the faint smell of tobacco. He had started smoking again. I had made him promise to quit when we were together. He had kept that promise then, but the pressure of being a CEO had changed him so much. Memories flooded back. We had met at Pratt Institute. He was an NYU business student visiting for a campus event. We were both caught in a sudden downpour, seeking shelter under an awning. I was struggling with a large, awkward easel. He had rushed over to help. Our love story began like a dream, filled with simple afternoons riding his beat-up scooter through Central Park, sharing cheap ice cream cones, and dreaming of a future together. We married when he was just starting his business. During those difficult years, I was the only one by his side, sharing instant noodles and counting every dollar. I gave up a scholarship to study in Paris to stay and support him. Then he became successful. The company grew, money poured in. We moved from a cramped apartment to a luxury condo, then to a suburban mansion. But the distance between us grew with our bank account balance. The dinners I cooked grew cold waiting for him. The texts saying he was busy, in a meeting, or sleeping at the office became more frequent. I became a decorative object in our lavish house. The breaking point was our 3rd anniversary. I had bought tickets to a concert at Carnegie Hall, a performance we had dreamed of seeing together as students. I dressed up in the red silk dress he loved and waited for him in the lobby. 1 hour, 2, then 3 passed. The concert ended. The crowds dispersed, leaving me alone under the bright lights of 57th Street. I called him dozens of times, but he never picked up. He came home late, reeking of alcohol. He said he forgot, that he was busy with a merger. He tossed an expensive designer handbag at me as an apology and passed out. I looked at the bag, then at my snoring husband, and I knew the man I loved was gone, replaced by James Carter, a ruthless, unfeeling money-making machine. The next day, when I brought him lunch in a last-ditch effort to reconnect, I smelled a strange perfume on the jacket slung over his office chair. Chanel No. 5, not my scent. Then I saw Ashley, his strategic partner, walk out of his office with a knowing smile. That was the last straw. I filed for divorce. What are you thinking about? James's voice pulled me back to the present. He had looked up and was watching me intently, his gaze heavy with thought. The night I waited for you at Carnegie Hall, I said without thinking. James flinched. A flicker of discomfort crossed his face. I'm sorry, he said, his voice low. That meeting, I really couldn't miss it. It doesn't matter anymore, I said with a hollow laugh, a sharp pain shooting through my incision as I moved. The past is the past. You got what you wanted. Career, reputation. I just don't want my son to grow up to be like you. Selfish and cold. James shot to his feet. You can call me a terrible husband, Claire, but don't you dare judge me as a father when I haven't even had the chance to be one, he snarled. I will make it up to him. He will have the best of everything. The best schools, the best future. The best for you is just money, isn't it? I looked him straight in the eye. But a child needs love. He needs a father to be present, not just a black card with no limit. What do you want, James? For me to think you'll give up everything to come home and change diapers? Be realistic. Money can't buy happiness, but without it, you can't protect anyone. Do you think your little art gallery can provide for him the way I can? I may not be as rich as you, but I can give him peace. Peace? He scoffed. Do you think you can escape the gossip of being a single mother? Do you think the tabloids will leave the ex-wife of James Carter alone to raise his son in some tiny apartment? You are so naive. Our argument was cut short by a knock on the door. An assistant in a dark suit entered, bowed to James, and placed a folder on the table. Sir, everything has been taken care of regarding the wedding cancellation. Miss Ashley's family is causing quite a stir. Her father wants to meet with you immediately. James waved a dismissive hand. Tell them I'll meet them later. I'm busy. Now get out. The assistant scurried away. James picked up the folder, pulled out a document, and handed it to me. What is this? I asked suspiciously. Read it. I scanned the typed words, my vision blurring. It was a formal child support and custody agreement. It stated that James would cover all expenses, buy a house, hire a nanny, and a private doctor for us. In return, he would have visitation rights anytime he wanted, and our son must carry the Carter name and be officially entered into the family records. When did you have this drawn up? I asked, my hands shaking. You only found out a few hours ago. I always have a contingency plan, he replied coolly, and I'm not asking for your opinion. I'm informing you. I crumpled the paper in my fist and threw it at his face. Get out. I'm not signing anything. You can't just steal my son. He didn't flinch as the paper ball hit his chest and fell to the floor. He calmly bent down, picked it up, smoothed it out, and placed it on the bedside table. Think it over. You're still weak. Don't get worked up. We'll talk tomorrow. I'm leaving a guard outside. Don't even think about running away with him. He turned and left, leaving me with a rising sense of panic and the terrifying realization that the bars of a golden cage were closing in around me. I lay frozen in bed, the cold click of the closing door echoing in my mind. The large room suddenly felt claustrophobic. I turned to look at my son, Leo, sleeping soundly, his little lips twitching as if dreaming of nursing. A fierce, protective determination surged through me. I would not let James control our lives. Late that night, James returned. He had changed into a crisp, dark blue shirt that amplified his usual aura of power, but the dark circles under his eyes betrayed an exhaustion he couldn't hide. He didn't speak, just quietly pulled a chair into the corner, opened his laptop, and began to work. The blue light from the screen illuminated his sharp features, creating a haunting play of shadows. The next morning, as the first weak rays of winter sun filtered through the blinds, James closed his laptop. He walked over to me, holding a black, metallic credit card, the kind rumored to have no limit. "Take it," he said, his tone as casual as if he were handing me a piece of paper. "The limit is non-existent. Buy whatever you or the baby need. The pin is your birthday." I looked from the sleek card to his eyes. The supreme confidence there felt like a profound insult. He still believed every problem could be solved with money. "I don't need it," I said, pushing his hand away. "I have enough to raise my son." James's brow furrowed in annoyance. "Don't be stubborn, Claire. Do you really think the pocket change you make from selling paintings is enough to give him the best life? Imported formula, organic diapers, private doctors, and later, the best private schools. How will you pay for that?" "I will raise my son my own way," I retorted, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "The most expensive things aren't always the best. Millions of children grow up perfectly healthy without your black card." He let out a derisive laugh. "You want James Carter's son to live a common, deprived life? I won't allow it. My son will have the absolute best." "By what right?" I snapped, the anger finally boiling over, making me forget the pain in my abdomen. "What right do you have to decide his life? You say you're his father, but where were you for the last 6 months? When I was suffering from morning sickness so severe I could barely stand, where were you? When I had to take a taxi to my appointments alone in the pouring rain, where were you? And when I had to sign the surgical consent forms myself, terrified and in agonizing pain, where were you, James?" I was gasping for air, tears streaming uncontrollably. The pent-up resentment of months came pouring out. "Don't talk to me about rights. You forfeited that right the moment you chose your meetings, your business trips, and your mistress over your family." James stood motionless, the hand holding the card hanging limply at his side. My accusations were like daggers, and he couldn't deflect them because they were all true. He looked at me, his gaze flickering with pain, regret, and helplessness. For the first time, I saw this proud man bow his head. "I know I was wrong," he said, his voice low and raspy. "I can't turn back time. But I want to make things right, for now and for the future. Please, give me a chance. Not for me. For him." He placed the card on the bedside table. "This money is his. Use it or don't, but don't refuse it just because you hate me. Think about our son." With that, he walked out onto the small balcony and lit a cigarette, his lonely silhouette framed against the gray sky. My heart was heavy. I knew he was partly right. I could hate him, but I had no right to deprive my son of the advantages he deserved. Yet accepting his help meant letting him back into our lives, accepting the very control I had fought so hard to escape. 2 days later, the hospital room was descended upon by an army. I was half asleep when I heard a commotion in the hallway. I opened my eyes to the surreal sight of a team of people carrying boxes and equipment into my room. Stacks of brand new, imported baby gear, a state-of-the-art bottle sterilizer, an air purifier, a self-rocking bassinet, and dozens of other things I didn't even recognize were being arranged in the corner. James stood in the middle of it all, tablet in hand, directing the staff like a general commanding his troops. "Careful with that, it's fragile," he instructed a worker carrying a space heater. "Are you turning my hospital room into a warehouse?" I asked, annoyed. He turned to me, a look of satisfaction on his face. "Just the essentials. The facilities here are inadequate." I wasn't comfortable. "Inadequate?" I scoffed. "This is the most expensive private suite in the hospital." Just then, a middle-aged woman in a crisp, light blue uniform entered. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, her expression serious and professional. Her name tag read, Mrs. Davis, Certified Newborn Care Specialist. "Good morning, ma'am," she said, nodding respectfully. "I am Mrs. Davis. Mr. Carter has hired me to assist with the care of the young master." I stared blankly at James. "This is Mrs. Davis," he explained. "She has 20 years of experience at the top international hospitals. She'll be here to help you." "I don't need a stranger to take care of my child," I protested immediately, a primal instinct making me wary of anyone getting near my baby. "You just had major surgery. You're weak. You can't be up all night with him," James stated firmly. "Mrs. Davis will handle the bathing, feeding, and changing. You just need to rest and recover." Without waiting for my consent, Mrs. Davis walked to the bassinet, expertly checked the room temperature, adjusted Leo's blanket, and then turned to me. "It is time for the young master's feeding. Have you expressed milk, or shall I prepare the formula?" The way she said young master made my skin crawl. My son was 2 days old and already saddled with such a detached, formal title. "I'll nurse him myself," I said, trying to sit up and lift him. "Ma'am, you are still on antibiotics. Your milk may not be ideal for the infant at this time," Mrs. Davis gently but firmly stopped me. "Mr. Carter has provided the highest grade Japanese formula, specially designed for premature infants." I looked to James for support, but he simply nodded in agreement with her. "Listen to her, Claire. She's the expert." Helplessness washed over me. I felt like my role as a mother was being stripped away right before my eyes. In the name of what was best for my son, they were pushing me aside. I was just the incubator, my job done. I bit my lip and watched as Mrs. Davis skillfully lifted my son, fed him the bottle, and burped him. Her movements were perfect, efficient, but so cold. They lacked the warmth, the sacred bond between a mother and her child. James watched, satisfied. He believed in professionalism, in established protocols. He didn't understand that a baby needs his mother's warmth more than any protocol. "Get some rest," he told me, before turning to take a business call. I turned my face to the wall, fresh tears falling. I felt utterly alone in a room full of people and things. James's control was tightening, becoming more sophisticated, disguised as care and concern. If I didn't do something, I would lose my son for good. That afternoon, Jessica returned with a thermos of rich chicken soup, something she insisted I needed. When she saw the mountain of baby gear and the uniformed nanny moving about like a robot, her jaw dropped. "What in the world is all this?" she whispered, sitting beside me. "I thought I walked into a department store." "James's handiwork," I replied with a wry, quiet smile. "He even hired a professional nanny. I'm practically redundant now." Jessica shot Mrs. Davis a suspicious glare, then leaned in close. "This is serious, Claire. I did some digging. James's family is already preparing the paperwork to claim custody. His mother, Margaret, has already spoken to their lawyers. You know how ruthless she is." My heart seized. Margaret, my former mother-in-law, had been the bane of my existence for 3 years. She was a woman of iron will who valued her family's name and legacy above all else. If she knew about Leo, she would stop at nothing to take him. "What do I do, Jessica?" I gripped her hand, my voice trembling. "I can't lose him." "We have to run," Jessica said, her eyes determined. "If you stay here, you'll lose. James is just being gentle now to lure you in. Once the baby is a little stronger, he'll show his true colors." "Run where? He has eyes and ears everywhere." "The Catskills," Jessica said quickly. "My aunt has a secluded cabin up there, deep in the woods. Very few people around. I have the key. You can hide there for a while. Once Leo is stronger, I'll figure out how to get you papers to go abroad, somewhere far away." "But his health. He's premature," I worried, looking at my sleeping son. "Don't worry," I already asked a doctor friend. "As long as you keep him warm and travel carefully, he'll be fine. The important thing is, we have to go now, before the DNA results are official and before Margaret gets involved." I hesitated. The plan was incredibly risky, but looking at James on the balcony, barking orders into his phone, and at the cold nanny, the fear of losing my son eclipsed everything else. I would rather struggle with him in hiding than let him grow up in this gilded cage, becoming a heartless copy of his father. "When do we go?" I asked, my voice firm with resolve. "The morning after tomorrow," Jessica calculated. I overheard James on the phone. "He has a critical shareholder meeting he can't miss. He'll leave the hospital early. I'll pull the car up to the service entrance in the back to get you." "What about Mrs. Davis?" "I'll take care of her," Jessica winked. "Maybe her morning coffee will have a little surprise in it, or I'll invent an emergency to get her out of the room. You just be ready." We whispered a few more details, trying to act as normal as possible. When James came back inside, he saw us huddled together and asked suspiciously, "What are you two plotting?" "Plotting your downfall," Jessica retorted sassily, standing up. "Well, I'll leave you two lovebirds to it." After she left, my heart pounded in my chest. The escape plan was set. It was the biggest gamble of my life. If I succeeded, I would have my freedom. If I failed, I couldn't bear to think of the consequences. The next 2 days passed in a state of excruciating tension, masked by a facade of calm. James spent most of his time at the hospital, working on his laptop. He was starting to learn how to be a father. Though Mrs. Davis handled everything, James tried to participate. He awkwardly learned to hold Leo, his large hands, so used to signing billion-dollar deals, trembling as they supported his son's fragile head. Once, I saw him secretly slip his finger into Leo's palm. My son, in his sleep, instinctively gripped it tightly. A rare, gentle smile graced James's lips. In that moment, he looked so much like the young student who had promised me a lifetime of happiness. "He's got a strong grip," James whispered to me, his eyes shining. "He's going to be a tough kid, like his dad." "Just like you," I blurted out, then regretted it. James looked at me, his expression softening. "Claire, I know you're still angry, but I really want us to try. For Leo's sake." "You think it's that simple?" I turned away, avoiding his gaze. "I'll wait," he said with conviction. "I'll prove to you that I've changed." His words made my resolve waver. There were moments, watching him clumsily try to change a diaper or jolt awake when Leo cried, that I almost gave in, almost believed in the happy family portrait he was trying to paint. But then the incessant business calls would pull him away, and the cold, commanding tone he used with his subordinates would bring me crashing back to reality. This was a temporary change, the novelty of first-time fatherhood. When the pressure of his world returned, would he still be here? The evening before our escape, James brought in a bowl of soup. "I had my private chef make this. Eat it while it's hot." He carefully spooned some, blew on it, and held it to my lips. This gesture, which would have once made me cry with happiness, now only filled me with guilt. "Thank you," I said, taking the bowl and eating mechanically. "I have that important meeting early tomorrow," he said. "I'll stop by later in the afternoon. Listen to Mrs. Davis while I'm gone." "Okay." "You go take care of business," I replied, keeping my voice steady. He leaned down and kissed Leo's forehead, then hesitated before placing a fleeting kiss on my hair. "Good night." After he left, I clutched my chest, my heart hammering with fear and remorse. "I'm sorry, James. I have no other choice." That night, I barely slept, secretly packing a small bag and hiding it under the bed. The rain began to fall outside, tapping against the window like the frantic beating of my own heart. The real storm was coming. At 7 a.m., the room was filled with the gray light of a rainy morning. I was already dressed, Leo bundled warmly in my arms. My heart pounded against my ribs. As planned, James had left at 6:30 for his meeting, giving Leo a quick kiss before rushing out, oblivious. The only obstacle was Mrs. Davis. Just as Jessica had planned, her morning coffee had been secretly dosed with a mild laxative. "Ma'am, the young master's bottle is ready," she said, her face looking slightly pained. "Just leave it. I'll feed him," I said calmly. "Can you just watch him for a moment? I need to use the restroom." She nodded, but then suddenly clutched her stomach, her face twisting in pain. Oh dear, my stomach. She quickly put the bottle down and rushed to the bathroom. The lock clicked shut. This was my chance. I grabbed the bag, scooped up Leo, and ran from the room like my life depended on it, not daring to look back at the expensive gadgets James had bought. The hallway was deserted. I hurried toward the service elevator at the far end of the corridor, the one Jessica said had no cameras. My incisions screamed with every step, but I gritted my teeth. Almost there, baby boy. We're almost free. The elevator door opened. I stepped inside and hit the button for the basement. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The doors opened to a gust of cold, damp air. I scanned the area and saw it. Jessica's familiar red, compact car parked discreetly behind a large dumpster. The headlights flashed twice. "Get in! Quick!" Jessica urged as I scrambled into the back seat. She slammed on the gas, and the car shot forward, leaving the monolithic hospital behind us. "We did it!" Jessica yelled, slamming her hand on the steering wheel in triumph. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, my relief immense but still laced with fear. Don't celebrate yet, not until we're out of the city. We weaved through morning traffic, heading for the highway. The rain fell harder. The city skyline receded in the rearview mirror. "We'll take the bridge and head upstate," Jessica said. "Should be there in a couple of hours. Try to get some rest." I couldn't sleep. It was 8:15 a.m. By now, Mrs. Davis would have discovered we were gone. She would call James. What would he do? He would tear the city apart to find me. "Jessica, do you think he can find us?" "No way," she scoffed. "This car is registered to my cousin, and I told you to turn off your phone and ditch the SIM card, right?" I touched the pocket where the new phone James had given me lay, powered down as instructed, but a terrible feeling told me it wouldn't be that easy. James was a predator, and his calculations always ran deeper than anyone imagined. About 30 minutes later, as we were crossing the George Washington Bridge, a phone rang. It was coming from my jacket, the phone James had given me. "Claire, I told you to get rid of it," Jessica yelled, panicking. "I did. I turned it off. How is it ringing?" I fumbled for the device. The screen was lit up with an unknown number, but I knew who it was. What do I do? "Don't answer. Throw it out the window. Now." I started to roll down the window, but my hand froze. If I didn't answer, he would only become more relentless. I took a deep breath and swiped to answer. Silence. Then, his voice calm and terrifying. "Are you enjoying your little drive?" "How did you know?" I stammered. A low chuckle. "Did you think that phone was just for making calls, Claire? It has an independent GPS chip. It was automatically activated the second you left the safe zone of the hospital. I've known where you are since you stepped out the door." I was paralyzed. It was all just a game to him. "What do you want?" I whispered, my voice trembling with despair. "I want you to turn the car around. Now." "Never!" I screamed. "I will never go back to your prison." "Look out the window to your right," he said, his tone still even. I turned my head. A large black SUV was driving parallel to us. The window rolled down, and a man in dark sunglasses waved, then pointed menacingly at our small car. "Those are my men," James said. "They've been following you since you got on the bridge. Now listen to me, Claire. You have 30 minutes to turn this car around. If you don't, I won't just bring you back. I will make your best friend regret the day she was born." "What are you going to do to Jessica?" I cried. "Her little interior design firm. It's handling the new Blue Moon Resort project for my company, isn't it? The biggest contract she's ever landed. All it takes is one phone call from me, and that contract is terminated. Her company will be blacklisted by the entire real estate association. She'll be bankrupt. Is that what you want?" His threat was a lightning bolt. I knew he would do it. "Don't, James, please. This is between us." "The choice is yours. Come back or watch your friend lose everything. 30 minutes, starting now." The line went dead. The world crashed down around me. Jessica had heard everything on speakerphone, her hands gripping the wheel so hard her knuckles were white. "Don't listen to him," she seethed. "He's bluffing. I don't care about the stupid contract." I looked at my friend, ready to sacrifice everything for me. I couldn't let her. "No, Jessica," I said, tears streaming down my face. "I can't do that to you. Turn the car around, please." Jessica hit the steering wheel, a cry of pure frustration escaping her lips. "That bastard." She pulled over, her shoulders shaking as she sobbed. "Thank you, Jessica," I whispered, touching her shoulder. "This is my fight." She wiped her tears and made a U-turn. Our little red car headed back towards the city, back towards the cage. Back at the hospital service entrance, James's black Maybach was waiting. He stood outside, smoking, his face a cold, emotionless mask. "You're just in time," he said, glancing at his watch. Jessica lunged at him, but his bodyguards held her back. "You monster! You call yourself a man?" James ignored her, taking one last drag from his cigarette. He turned to me. "Give me the baby." I recoiled. "No. It's cold and raining, Claire. Do you want him to get sick?" "Get in the car." I had no choice. I handed my son to him. He took him carefully, shielding him from the rain. "Get in," he commanded, pushing me gently into the back seat and slamming the door. Through the window, I saw Jessica crying in the rain, a heartbreaking image seared into my memory. The car was a silent, luxurious prison. We drove to a penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park, a stunning, sterile space of glass and gray marble. "This is our new home," James announced. "You mean my new prison," I said wearily. "Call it what you want. You and Leo will stay here, under my watch, until I'm sure you won't try to run again." "And when will that be? In a lifetime?" He didn't answer. He walked to the bar and poured a drink. "You'll have everything you want here, Claire. Maids, doctors, credit cards. Everything except the freedom to walk out that door without my permission." "So I'm just a doll in your collection?" "You are the mother of my son," he corrected. "And I want my son to have a family." "This isn't a family. There's no love here, only control." "Love?" He turned, his eyes dark. "We had love once, Claire. You're the one who threw it away when you filed for divorce. What love are you demanding now?" I had no answer. He was right. I had been the one to leave. I retreated to my room. It was opulent, but cold. I went into the bathroom to splash water on my face. When I looked up, my breath caught. Hanging on the wall, professionally framed behind glass, was a small oil painting of a field of sunflowers, their faces turned towards a brilliant sun. It was my first painting from my time at Pratt. A clumsy, amateur piece I had wanted to throw away, but James had insisted on keeping it. "I like it," he had said back then, his smile so gentle. "It's like you. Always reaching for the sun. No matter what happens, promise me you'll always be bright and strong like this." I thought he would have thrown it away with the rest of our broken marriage. But he had kept it. He had protected it like a treasure. My hand trembled as I touched the cold glass. Why? Why keep this cheap memento while destroying everything else? That night, James and I ate dinner in suffocating silence. He had tried to be kind, serving me soup he'd warmed up himself. "Stop acting," I'd said. "We're not newlyweds." His face fell. "I'm not acting. I was so scared today, Claire. When I saw the empty room, my heart stopped. For the first time in my life, I was truly afraid." His vulnerability confused me, but I couldn't trust it. The next day, out of boredom, I explored his home office. Behind a bookshelf, I found a hidden safe. On a whim, I typed in the date we first met, under the awning in the rain, 10/17. Click, it opened. Inside, there was no cash or gold, just a small velvet box and a folder. I opened the box. It was the cheap, silver crescent moon necklace he had given me in college. The one I had thrown into the lake in Central Park the day we divorced. He had found it. He had hired divers to retrieve a worthless trinket I had discarded. I picked up the folder. It contained documents for a trust fund established in the name of Leo Alexander Carter. The amount was $300 million. The fund was created yesterday. And tucked inside was a handwritten note. "To my son, Leo. I'm sorry I didn't know you existed sooner. I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you. I love you, Dad." His love for our son was real, but so was his arrogance. He had named him, claimed him, without a single thought for my opinion. In his world, I was merely the vessel. When he came home that evening, he was jubilant, waving the official DNA results, 99.99%. "He's my son, Claire, the Carter heir." He tried to hug me, but I pushed him away. "That paper only proves biology, James. It doesn't make you a father." The joy vanished from his face. "What more do you want from me? I canceled my wedding. I set up a trust fund. I want you to understand that being a father isn't about throwing money at a child. I finally exploded. It's about being there. It's about sleepless nights and first steps. But you'll always be too busy, won't you? Too busy for us. I have to work to provide this life, he roared back. Don't be so ungrateful. Then keep your money, I screamed. You didn't cancel your wedding for me or for him. You did it for your pride, because you couldn't stand the thought of your heir being raised without your name. Shut up, he raised his hand to strike me, but stopped, his arm trembling in midair. I met his furious gaze without flinching. Go on, do it. Show me who you really are. He dropped his arm, turning to punch the wall instead. You're right, he seethed. I'm selfish, but I love my son, and I will never, ever let him go. After the fight, a crushing silence fell. I knew then that I couldn't win. He had all the power. But I had to find a way to protect Leo's childhood. I walked out to the living room where he sat in the dark. We need to talk, I said, my voice eerily calm. I have a proposal, a deal. He looked up, wary. What deal? I know I can't fight you and win. So, I'll give up. I will sign away my parental rights. You will have full custody. He stared at me, stunned. Are you serious? On one condition, I continued, my heart breaking with every word. I will stay here and be his primary caregiver until he turns 3. For these 3 years, you provide for us, but you do not interfere with how I raise him. You can be his father, play with him, love him, but you cannot separate him from me. Why 3 years? He asked, his voice rough. Because those are the most critical years for a child's emotional development. He needs his mother. After his 3rd birthday, I will leave. I will disappear from your lives forever. He will be old enough for preschool, and you can give him everything else. You will not look for me. James was silent for a long, long time, studying my face as if trying to see into my soul. He couldn't comprehend a mother making such a sacrifice. You would leave your son? He whispered. I am not leaving him, I corrected, tears finally falling. I am doing this for him. It is better to suffer one great pain than to drag him through a lifetime of war between us. I can't trust your love anymore, James, and I don't have the strength to fight your family. He bowed his head, clasping his hands together. Finally, he looked up, his eyes filled with a pain that mirrored my own. Fine, he said, his voice hoarse. I accept your deal. We have 3 years. The pact was made. I had just signed the death warrant for my own heart. 1,095 days. That's all I had left with my son. I walked back to my room, each step a crushing weight. Leo was awake in his crib. He saw me and broke into a sweet, innocent smile. Oh, my baby, I sobbed, lifting him and holding him tight, burying my face in his soft blanket. Mommy is so sorry. I'm so sorry. Outside, in the dark living room, James sat alone. He had won. He had his son. He had my compliance. He had achieved his objective, like the masterful businessman he was. So why did he feel so hollow? He looked toward my closed bedroom door, where a thin sliver of light escaped from underneath. It was the only light in the vast, cold penthouse. He had won the battle, but lost the war. He had my presence, but he had lost my heart forever. The light in this penthouse would only stay on for 3 years, illuminating a broken family, a charade of happiness for the sake of a child. James lit a cigarette, leaned his head back, and closed his eyes. A single, hot tear escaped and traced a path down his cheek. He had gotten everything he wanted, and in doing so, had lost the only thing that ever truly mattered.